So welcome to Melissa part 2. Welcome back.
Hey.
So Melissa is a big contributor in the Lovefly Facebook group and just been away. So those who listen to the podcast, you remember Melissa came on before. You also did a grilling with Steve Ball, didn't you, Captain Steve?
Yep.
Which went on long after the recording, actually, and I wish I was kept recording because I didn't
thought you could have done 2 shows with that. Actually,
no, that was good. Yeah, he needed to lie down in the dark room after. No, didn't he? Really enjoyed it. So tell us. I've been following your travels, and we're dying to hear how you got on. So, tell us. Well, perhaps give us a potted history of where you were and the journey that you've made, and I can shut up and drink coffee.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me back again. I've been really looking forward to doing this. It was a little bit of a goal of mine for when I got back off this big long trip that everyone has heard so much about. If you're on the Lovefly Facebook group, I've been posting about this trip for months, since January. I think I booked it. And yeah, people seem to be quite invested in it once I finally took that flight, which was great.
Well, once you post something like that, we all want to know, how's it going,
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah,
the pictures kept coming and everything. I gave a little bit of an intro in my podcast with Steve, but I was a nervous flyer as long as I can remember, since a child. And I think that stemmed from just not knowing how planes worked and getting panicky when I saw flaps and things working, and I thought the wing was falling off when I was about 8. And that just put an unease in me.
Yes.
And like I said before, when I was 15, I moved to the UK. Before that, we flew back and forth quite a lot because I have a Canadian dad and a British mum, so we traveled to see family. Once I'd moved to the UK, we didn't fly very much at all. But eventually, I don't know, in my sort of early 20s, I started flying to Europe with no issue, really. I was just a bit apprehensive about the takeoff, but I was fine in the rest of the flight. And then I had my first son in 2010. We still continued to fly with him a bit. We even went to Australia, which was pretty huge. I remember being quite happy on that flight. Miraculously, I must have been at a good stage in my life. And then I had my second child in 2013, and we didn't fly so much after that, mainly for financial reasons, and also just traveling with 2 little kids was a bit much. And I was actually, since I've been on Lovefly, I never really identified why I got worse, but I've been able to dive into a bit deeper just recently, and I had to look at the timeline for these particular events, but I had a look last night, and in 2014, that MH370 missing plane happened, which probably the whole world could not understand what happened there. Then the same year, that other plane got shot down, passenger plane got shot down. And then the one that really triggered me was in 2015, the Germanwings pilot mental health crisis. That just unsettled me so much. And I used to do the whole thing you're not supposed to do, read about everything, watch shows about it, blah, blah, blah. And I never really realized how much that affected me until when I started flying after that, was when I started to be anxious during the whole flight. Right. So before it was a takeoff, then I was absolutely fine. And I was just on edge the whole flight. And thinking about it, it's probably because I realized things can go wrong like that mid-flight out of the blue. So that's just a realization I've had in the last few days.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. So I think I know they're very rare, but those 3 things happened quite close together, and they were such obscure things, weren't they? They're not even things I could have dreamed to ask Captain Steve about, Well, I do now because I know they happened, but they're almost like you couldn't make them up. So after that, I was like, ooh, I don't really like it at all. And then in 2018, I did your Virgin course, which was really good. But again, I think, like you always say, it's not really a quick fix with such a long-standing fear. And it probably helped some people getting over it in one day, but it wasn't quite enough for me. I got some
You
good
did that.
knowledge.
Why did I forget that? Did you come to, was it the Southampton one?
Yeah.
So the last, yes, I remember now. We talked about the very last one in June 2018 that I ran.
Was that the last one?
The last one I ran with Flight. So you were on it. So
oh, really?
you just screwed it up basically. And from then onwards, it never ran again. No, it's just the way it felt. I won't bore you with the details, but yes, that was the last one we ran. Yeah, with Flights anyway.
But I think, like I said before, the technical knowledge with the pilot was great, and the noise abatement thing was a revelation to me. But yeah, unfortunately, I kept getting worse after that, and I had a couple of long flights to Canada actually in 2017 with my family. Well, that was before the Virgin course, but I did the Virgin course because I was going on a flight with to visit a friend. We were meeting in Toronto, and it was my first time flying long haul by myself. And that was when my fear got really bad. I just remember sitting on the plane feeling so trapped. And I was by the window seat, but when strangers are next to you, you feel a bit like you can't keep asking them to get out. When it's your own family, it doesn't matter. But and I just recall, like, internally in my head just screaming and crying, like, I need help, somebody help me. But on the outside I looked perfectly fine. So, but yeah, and the trip home was a night flight, and that was awful. Like, I didn't sleep a wink, and I just felt horrendous. And then the next year I went with my family to the US, and again I was pretty bad. Like, the anticipation had started then, and the same sort of staring at the map the whole time. The white knuckling thing. I don't know, just something.
You find it hard to remember now, aren't you?
yeah. Just that, I don't know, it's just that utter panic for all that time. And then we had the pandemic, so didn't fly for a few years. And then I came to the point last year where I'd booked that Iceland trip, and before that I'd gone to Paris with some friends, and both of those I was just a right complete state really for all those flights. And I went with 4 or 5 friends to Paris, and they knew that I was doing it to test how I was, and they did their very best to help me. But yeah, it was really hard. I was crying on the trip, and on the verge of getting the Eurostar home, and I was crying to my husband, crying to my friends. And before the flight I just drunk so much wine, my heart was racing at like 150 beats a minute for about 12 hours, and it was like I'd run a marathon or something. So shortly after that we had the Iceland trip, which was more of the same. And when I got home from that, I just said, I can't do this anymore. Like, it just took its toll on me so much, mentally, physically. So we'd had a flight coming up to Portugal in the October, and I immediately cancelled that. And I said, I just can't even contemplate flying, and thought that was it for me. I was looking at cruises, I was looking at train holidays, and that was upsetting because I thought, I'm not going to ever get back to Canada, which is where my family and friends are, where I grew up. So that was hard to take. And that phase didn't last that long, because I still found that I still wanted to travel. I still thought about flying quite a bit. And I think that's when I found the Lovefly Facebook group, and I feel like that was me sort of reaching my rock bottom, and from then on it was building from there. And that's what I've continued to do since, in the last few months.
And I think it's really interesting the way you've unpicked how it built over time, like the first beginnings, and then this happened and that happened, and then it's built and built, and then to the point where you're giving up trips, or you're doing them, or sort of under protest.
Yeah. And you
And
just
even
you just don't
considering
enjoy
not.
and you just don't enjoy the trip. Like the Iceland one, half of it was ruined really for me and to my husband, to some extent my husband, because he didn't know what was wrong with me. And that's another thing I didn't used to do. I didn't disclose to anybody how bad I felt, and that's quite hard for your family, because they think, what on earth have I done wrong?
Yes.
Why is she in this state? Like, and it's isolating for you. But it was almost like if I admitted I felt bad, something bad would happen to the plane, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Like I'm scared of this flight, so something's going to go wrong. If I say I'm scared, that's going to make it happen.
Yeah, that's quite some power you had there.
But yeah, now I know that's not the case, obviously, but that's
Well,
where I was at the time.
I mean, maybe you are. But yeah, so you
I probably wouldn't be here now if I was.
Yeah, you worked out now that you don't have that power. Okay, that's fine. That's a superpower you don't have or nor want.
Exactly. Yeah, so after that, discovered Lovefly Facebook group and the Lovefly podcasts. Immediately started listening to the podcast. I recognized you obviously from the course. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I said before, I can't believe I didn't know it existed. But that was really the case, because I'm in lots of Facebook groups for other things, so I don't know how I never searched it. But anyway, I started searching for fear flying Facebook groups, I guess. And yeah, the first podcast I listened to was, I saw you had loads of pilots, which really appealed to me. I've always wanted to talk to pilots. I don't know any in real life, unfortunately. Otherwise they'd be getting the third degree from me. Yeah. So I listened to the one of Captain Chris first. The Australian pilot, and I just loved it. And he was so passionate about flying. And then I think I listened to Captain Emma. Then I watched Emma's EasyJet inside the cockpit, which I absolutely loved, because seeing what goes on in there, and how calm they are, that was a great show. And you can get it on YouTube if anyone wants to watch it, because that's how I got it. And obviously then all the ones with Steve, of which there's loads. And yeah, those are the ones I listened to first. And then I think all the other fearful flyers, those stories are really nice. And just thought, oh my God, there's other people that feel like me. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And then most people already know from one of the podcasts with Steve, I took a light aircraft flight around the same time. That was mainly so I could talk to a pilot, a way of getting in with a private pilot. So I gave him a grilling, much like I gave Captain Steve.
What's going on? How long is this flight?
Yeah, the flight itself was 20 minutes, but the chat before was about an hour and a half. What did I do then? I did all the usual stuff people talk about on Lovefly. I tracked flights, I read books, I just posted and commented a lot in the Facebook group, which I think helped me, because the more advice I gave to others, the more I could remember that advice myself. And I'm convinced that's what caused a change in my thought process, is me continually saying the same stuff to people every day, finally starting to believe it myself. And you always say about rewriting your brain paths or whatever, so it's not your default, oh, be scared. When I was on the flight, it was much easier to access those rational thought processes, because I think I'd started, making that path in my brain, and it had become much more established. I was surprised. I thought I'd get in a state of panic on the plane and not be able to access those rational thoughts, but that wasn't the case at all. And
so you see, sorry to interrupt you, Melissa. So you see that, so particularly writing it for other people has helped to reinforce it, that you're able to then, and so that's a really interesting one, because that takes time and effort to do that consistently, to answer people, and you've done that.
But it does help. Yeah, it does help, and it helped me, and hopefully it helped others. And just built that sense of community for me as well. Like, I've made pretty much people I consider friends on that group, and when I got off my flight in Calgary, there was about 1 million posts that had been tracking my flight, and yeah, that was just felt so special, and I can't thank everyone enough, because I could literally feel them with me. I knew they'd be tracking me, and I was up there going, "Oh, they're watching me, they're with me." And like, so a few people in particular, sent me personal messages of support. And yeah, I posted a few times in the month before with wobbles, just, and I immediately felt better for having done it, rather than just bottling it up and going down that rabbit hole, just getting it out. That really helped me. But I'm a person that writes things down anyway, that I want, when I used to be revising, I'd write things down. And I used to write notes from your podcast, and yeah, I've got notebooks full of random stuff. I took a notebook on the plane with my notes. Yeah, I like reading stuff, but what works for me doesn't necessarily work for others. Everyone has to find their own
you wrote
thing.
it down. So you've gone through the podcast and written down things that have helped you.
Yeah, like things that stand out for me.
If I could push you, would there be any phrases or things that you thought that you keep coming back to that have been particularly helpful?
The one about thoughts are not facts. They're just things made up by your brain. They're not real. So if I'd have the doom thoughts that you call them, sometimes, when I was in my fearful flyer stage, I'd have many, many, many doom thoughts at night, and I wouldn't sleep. But if a doom thought dared enter my mind before these flights, I sort of like acknowledged them, like you said, as what they are. But then, I'd go, these aren't real. This is a story in your imagination. You're safe right now. You're in your own bed. So for me, from your stuff, a lot of it was the mindset stuff. I think changing your mindset, changing your thought processes. Yeah, that was really key for me. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure there's loads of others, but they'll probably come to me at some point.
No, so it's what's top of pile, isn't it? And yeah, and I've always thought that was quite a useful one, that we can talk ourselves into all sorts of things. But I notice when I do it myself, there's a moment of truth when I do something. It's like, even if I went into right now and went to the fridge, and there was a packet of biscuits there, and I inhaled them, I'd be telling myself, well, I deserve this, but I'm aware that I'm telling myself a load of old crap.
Yeah.
But I'll deny it if asked, under, cross-examination. But I know, my heart of hearts, I know I'm telling myself some nonsense. And I think we always tell ourselves stuff. Sometimes we're aware of it. Well, I think most of the time we're aware of it, but we might sort of like block it out and kind of go, I'm just going to check this air crash investigation. I know I shouldn't, and I'm just going to look on this weather app, but I know I shouldn't, but we know, and we do it anyway, because that's what we do. Because I don't know why we do that, but we do.
Well, I think, I think you said in podcasts as well that why do you attach particular meaning to those thoughts and think that they mean something? And I think you say something like, I'm a banana. Does that mean I'm a banana? And you're like, how ridiculous.
It's pretty technical stuff by the sound of it, isn't it?
Well, you also had a good one about intrusive thoughts, and you had all these stats about weird and wonderful things people thought about, like stabbing somebody, or I don't know. And I was guilty of that. Like, if I heard a particular song on the radio, I'd think, oh, that's a sign. Or like my son would go through Let's Play Airplanes, and then it crashes, and it's, you think, this is going to sound really dumb, but even on this holiday, the day before we came home, one of my sons said to the other, oh, you're going to die tomorrow or something. And my brain was like, oh God. Oh, and I had to sort of like go, okay, they're just talking nonsense. If they talked like that at any other day, I would think nothing of it,
Yeah. So you didn't send him ahead on his own flight.
Oh dear. So that's like the stupid things that your brain does. And it was the same, you know, when people get nervous about the safety demo on the plane, and you think, oh, you know, that means something could happen. And then when I was in Canada, I was at a wedding and we went on a river cruise and they did a safety demo, you know, on the river cruise, and nobody paid a blind bit of attention.
No.
And I wasn't like, oh God, this boat might sink. It's just you attach meaning to the things.
That's a great link.
Mm.
That's a great link, yeah. That you didn't
Oh,
think
I think because it was 2 days before I flew home, I was like, oh, they're doing a safety demo.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do not care in the slightest.
No. That's really, so talk us through then. So I know you said I did what everybody else does, but just be really like spell it out like Mickey Mouse style. You joined the Lovefly Facebook group, then you I think you also came on one of our webinars, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I did. So
battered Steve.
Yeah, that's
in the nicest possible way.
Yep. Before that actually was when I did the flight to Dublin with Debbie. So that was an exposure flight, and that was to see if my early workings were helping me enough to book this long haul flight. So as soon as I got back from that, I did book the long haul flight. So then I was like, all systems go, you know, I've got 6 or 7 months to be able to do a very long flight. And yeah, so then in March I did your webinar. So before that I did the 30-day program. That was really good. I liked, again, I was familiar with most of the technical stuff from the previous courses, but I did like your mindset work. And I think that's really what I've worked on in the past few months. Of course, you need to know all the information. So I accumulated all that first about planes and flying and pilots and all the rest. Yeah, and then you gave me that amazing opportunity to talk to Steve, and yeah, that was just the best. And that helped me a lot. Like, Steve is an absolute legend and such a nice guy. So, you know, compassionate and understanding, even with people. He must think, oh my God, you're asking ridiculous questions, but he doesn't care. Like, he
doesn't think that at all, actually.
And he doesn't make you feel silly.
No, because I remember when you did the webinar, you had a lot of questions, and you said, I've got lists, and I thought, oh, here we go. And,
I always have lists, you know.
And I just thought, oh my goodness! But I actually felt quite bad. So I thought we got through a good chunk of the questions, but obviously with the other people as well. Yeah. And so that's why I thought you've put the time in. And I said to Steve, fancy doing this? He says, yeah, you know, if he's not doing it, he said, I'm up for that. Yeah. And the thing was, that one we recorded, we stopped there. I think we did about an hour and something. It was an hour and a half, which is like incredibly long. I went off the call and you carried on. And I thought, oh, I should have stayed on. I think it would have definitely been, I mean, all the questions you asked were brilliant, because that's the sort of stuff people want to ask. It's all the questions you don't dare ask, but now you can. Yeah.
And there's been really good feedback from that too. So I think a lot of people did find those weird and wonderful questions quite useful.
Yeah, because you came up with some I thought, oh, I hadn't thought of that one before.
Yeah, so
I was just getting scared by the end of it. If you don't mind me saying, I thought, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Come on, Steve, we got something decent here.
Yeah. I also watched a lot of videos on YouTube of takeoffs, landings, etc. And tracked a lot of flights on Flight Radar. I track a lot of other Lovefly members' flights. I know you don't always encourage that, but it helped me and it helps others. I think it's just to focus on one particular flight, and you see, you know, there it is, flying along happily, you know, and yeah, I don't know. It's a useful little thing for some of us.
Yeah, I'm on the I'm 50-50 on that, because it's like I have to have my flight tracked, or I would like to have my flight tracked.
Yeah, and exactly.
It's what's the first few words of the sentence, and then it's I can get it. You know, it's probably very comforting to think there's all these people thinking about you.
Yeah.
And I think it's like if you go for a job interview and you've had like 5 good luck messages before you go in, you do feel a little bit of a glow, don't you? And I imagine it's that, but you know, much bigger.
Like I said, I think it's your reliance on it, isn't it? If you have an over reliance on anything, it's not good.
But you know, like if you've got loads of people tracking you, and you're also gripping the seats, watching the flight map, that it's going to be safe, isn't it? Because you're holding it up there and you've got everybody else willing it across the ocean. So
yeah, of course. And then in June I did the EasyJet course, which I didn't really want to do the theory. I wanted to do the flight, and I wanted to do a flight out of Gatwick, so it would get me familiarized with Gatwick again. And then it was cancelled due to weather, so that, from my point of view, was a big waste of money. But anyway, I was like, well, what do I do now? Should I try and book another little flight somewhere? But then I realized, no, 6 weeks before, I'm just gonna have to get on with it. So that's what I did. And like I said, I post a lot on the group about anticipatory anxiety, and I constantly link to a post I did about it, and I should probably put it as a pinned post or something, because I'm always inserting it into comments, because it's such a common thing. And really, it's the worst part about flying for a lot of people. Is the time before. So there's a really good book I read, which is in that post, CBT Guide to Overcoming Anticipatory Anxiety, by Martin Sith and Sally Winston. I recommend that one. But I put some take-home points in my Facebook post. But yeah, it's really useful to know how the mind plays tricks on you, really, in that period of time before you fly.
Yeah. So you did your flight. How was it? You know, the way I saw all the pictures and stuff.
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
obviously followed some of the posts. But what was it like? You know, the going out and then
So sure. So the main thing I noticed was that anticipatory anxiety was hugely reduced, like hugely. So much so that I was joking with Debbie that I usually lose weight before the holiday because I can't eat. And this time I didn't at all, because I just ate normally. And I slept absolutely fine until the night before, but you know, got to cut yourself some slack. That I'll sort of take that. The day before there was some anxiety, but I think I said on the Facebook post that I looked at that anxiety slightly differently. That's mainly from Geeta. You know, she does a lot of stuff about anxiety and just sitting with it, like feeling it, letting it, like, sort of study your anxiety, really. Why is it happening? When? And I discovered before the holiday that it would come in waves, like Geeta says, and it would reduce and then it would come again. And it was usually in transition periods. So when I finished work, I was like, oh God. And I think it was residual panic of, oh, maybe I won't see these guys again, you know, like maybe I won't ever come back to work. You know, thoughts like that. When I drop my dog off, maybe I won't see my dog again. But rationally, I didn't think that anymore. But I think it was,
they're just automatic thoughts, weren't they?
Yeah, sort of that wave of adrenaline, whatever. So yeah, I didn't feel great the night before, but yeah, I knew I had to get on with it. There's no way I wasn't going. And I thought, part of it, I think, was just nervousness that maybe all this tons of work I'd done wasn't going to work, and where would I go from there? You know, because I have literally tried everything in the past as well, which I haven't touched on here, but you know, various therapies and all the rest. So there was that. And anyway, didn't get much sleep, got up, went to the airport. It was all fine. Gatwick was surprisingly calm. 5 minutes through security. We had stayed at a hotel the night before, which was really helpful, because it was a morning flight. And we went to the gate when they called the gate. Usually my husband hates going early, so we end up like dashing over like headless chickens. But I was like, no, we're going on time. Maybe I can catch the pilots. I didn't catch the pilots, but I sat there, and yeah, that period before boarding is the worst, like probably for many people. But I was like, oh God. And I had, my family's like hugely aware of this fear now, even my kids. And I know some people don't want their kids to know, but for me, it's been really beneficial. they're 10 and 13, and the 13-year-old just, he knew to try and distract me. You know, he's like, oh, Mom, you can go on my Nintendo Switch whenever you want. You know, we can do crosswords and this and that. Like, he's amazing and such an insightful boy. And I'd told my husband in advance, like, if I start spiraling, tell me to do my activities. I brought loads of activities for the flight. And so, you know, he'd come up with some of my little quotes that I like trust your training and all that. And he'd say that to me. And that was really nice, actually.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, yeah, you're right.
Well, what I like about that is the briefing that you gave your partner, because that is, I think that's really important, because a lot of partners, not through not wanting to help, don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
that whole,
say,
you'll be fine.
Look at me, I'm all right.
Yeah.
So great.
You'll be fine. There's nothing to worry about. And you're like, and then you'll say that, well, you always look all right on the plane. You just don't really talk. And it's like, yeah, but internally, I'm literally, I'm screaming in my head. And yeah, interestingly, I got that idea to prep him before, just from like, I think it was before we had our second child, and I said, you know, I want you to do X, Y, and Z when I'm in labor with the second child, like that you learned from the first. And it's like, yeah, let's prep you before. And yeah, he was able to do that, and both my sons were great. And they're aware of the fear, but they know, like, I'll just say, it's just mummy being silly, you know, and people can have anxieties about lots of things. It's perfectly safe, you know, and I think I'm showing them a skill by working on the anxiety, you know, that you can, you know, I could be like, well, we're never flying again, kids, but that's not how I want our family life to be. So, yeah. So anyway, I was sat there waiting to board, quite worried, and then I got out my inspiration album on my phone, which I've been working on for 9 months, and it has screenshots of lots of comments from Lovefly people, some stuff, some even my own advice, which John Bond told me to, you know, sometimes read back my own advice. And then it has those little, I share them sometimes on Lovefly, you know, little quotes from people, mainly about being brave in the face of anxiety. You know, having courage. It's okay to be scared and still do things. So one of the things was, it's a really great Matt Haig quote. I've got it written down, actually. I'm just going to read it out because it literally got me on the plane. And I love Matt Haig. He said, it's amazing what you can do and still be scared. Don't wait to not be scared. If you want to do it and know you'll feel better having done it, let yourself be scared. It's amazing how much you can do while still being terrified. And fear gives up when it isn't listened to. So I read that one over and over again. And just and it was just basically going, it's okay to feel scared. Like,
that's Matt Haig.
Yep. Yeah, he writes lots of great books too. Yeah, he's an awesome guy. I actually got to see him at Salisbury Cathedral on a book tour. But yeah, that just popped up on my Instagram one day, and I was like, that's literally one of the best things I've ever read in my life. And anyway, I was just reading that stuff and similar stuff over and over. And then I was showing my husband like some of the stuff people had commented to me, and he could see what an amazing support I had on there. And, you know, because sometimes he's like, why are you spending so much time on this? Is this actually healthy for you, you know? And at least he could see it paid off. But anyway, I'll get through that bit. Get being on the actual plane. So we boarded and told the cabin crew I was a bit anxious. They weren't that bothered. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I've got the tools to get through this myself. That was the first time I'd ever told anybody. So also the storm Anthony was going on at the time as well. So the weather was atrocious. So when they did tell me, oh, it's going to be quite turbulent for the first 45 minutes due to storm activity, and the cabin crew will be seated for 45 minutes. I was like, okay. And I had Steve's voice in my head, you know, they won't fly if it's not safe. I knew all about, they have this advanced weather fracking, and there's no way they'd take any chances. So I was doing okay. I put on my noise cancelling headphones, my playlist, that helps me so much. I don't actually listen to any podcasts on the flight. I haven't had to, but my music, I've also spent tons of time making this massive playlist. And yeah, that I love it. When I take off, it's just amazing. I don't even know. I don't know. I get in the zone and I'm just like, yeah, this is great. But and then I got rescue remedy spray, and I got a fidget ring, and I cuddled my Lovefly elephant. I probably look like a small child, but yeah, she was with me on all the flights. I was cuddling her like a child. And yeah, I was sat with my two kids, which I've never done on a flight before. They've always been with my husband, and I managed to talk to them. I managed to be a regular mom, so that is like huge. You know, I looked over at one of my sons before we took off, and he was crying, and I thought, what the hell's going on? And it was because some stuff was dripping on him from overhead. And I called the cabin crew. I'm sure it was nothing to worry about, but she came over, said it's just condensation, or, you know, happens a lot. But we could reassure him, because I was like, oh God, I can't have him crying at takeoff, like worried about something, getting a fear, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, we took off. It was wet, but I didn't think it was massively bumpy. I think the Dreamliner is pretty smooth. Like, I found it smooth all the flights. A bit of turbulence, but nothing major. And yeah, once we got in the air, I just settled down. Like, I did a few of my activities, watched a couple of comedy shows I'd seen before, not quite there with the movie, but played some games on my phone. I did some coloring, chatted to my kids a lot actually, and we were up and down to go to the toilet constantly, because, you know, I think for the kids as well and me, it's something to do. So
yeah,
you know, one needs to go to the toilet.
Flights, yeah. Can
One
I go
needs
now?
to go. You all have to get out. Then you got to get back in. Then somebody else has to get out. So, and I meant to say, what was weird was these dimmable Dreamliner windows. I'm not keen on those. So they dimmed the windows in a day flight. So the flight was at 11 in the morning. Got to Canada at lunchtime. Broad daylight the whole way, but they dimmed it to make it look like night, which I wasn't keen on, personally.
No, I don't know what that's about either.
No,
I'm not a big fan. I'm with you. Jamie said that as well. Jamie Fraser said that.
And I'm like, I don't like having zero control over my own window. Like, they can centrally control them, and then you can have control over it yourself. But I think it's their controls when they decide when it all goes dark. And I was like, what on earth? It's a day flight. I've never experienced that before.
Yeah.
Surely you want to stay awake. But anyway. And yeah, so it was long, and it was 9 hours, I think. So quite tedious, but I felt pretty normal. And I took propranolol, which slows my heart rate, because my heart is very prone to racing. But I didn't take anything else. No drink, or I think I had a small glass of wine on the plane, but no drink before, and no diazepam or anything that I used to take. I had like a couple of moments where I'm like, oh my God, I'm like 5 miles in the air going at 500 miles an hour. And just the concept of that is like insane. But I've talked to friends, and even people that aren't fearful flyers are like, what the hell, you know, like that's such a weird concept.
It is.
And I'm like, I'm over Greenland or whatever, like in the middle of nowhere. So I don't think you can allow yourself to think that deeply about it. But then we landed. That was fine. I love landing in Calgary because you don't have to circle for ages like at Gatwick. It's just on the ground in 20 minutes. And what was strange was I expected to be super emotional when I landed, because I'm like, oh, I've done it, blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't. And it was, I think in the past, I burst into tears and think, I survived this near-death experience, you know. But it was just, I was like, oh, I'm here now, you know, let's just go have our holiday. And that was awesome. And also, I think people have said before to have sort of an anchor thought on your travels. And for me, I actually used it more with the anticipation, but it was just hugging my childhood best friend, you know. And I saw her, I think, about 4 days into the trip, and when I couldn't sleep at night, I'm like, in 4 days you're gonna hug Kendra, you know, you're gonna be at Kendra's house. And don't know if you saw the photos, but she lives in this beautiful location, like on a lake next to some winery.
Yeah, I hated her, to be honest. You know, I just thought I don't like you.
Yeah, but we had such a great time with her and her family, and yeah, it was perfect. And then the whole trip was amazing. So busy, but I tried to keep up with Lovefly as best I could and listen to a few podcasts, but it was a very busy trip. And yeah, I had a bit of a lull at the halfway point, which is quite common for me. And maybe it's just also, you know, kind of sucks to think you've only got, you know, 1 week left or whatever. So I think some of it was just emotion, you know. It was a big trip for me, you know, seeing family, friends. There was a family wedding, which, you know, I haven't been to a family wedding over there since I was 11. So yeah, that was pretty huge. And yeah, just catching up with everybody again. So the wedding was on the Saturday. I came home on the Monday. I knew Sunday would be a difficult day. 1, because it was the day before a flight. 2, I drank alcohol for 13 hours and stayed up till 3:30 in the morning. And, you know, just that whole, oh God, you know, this is over now.
Yeah.
So that was a bit rough. But I was really grateful. My husband did all the packing on the way home, so that was nice. I did all the packing going, but yeah, everybody was just wiped after the wedding, so I didn't have to see too many family on the Sunday. Everyone was exhausted. And then the Monday morning was time to go home. And I really didn't want to take the flight, but mainly because I was so tired, and the thought of doing that, you know, huge amount of traveling.
Yeah.
I just couldn't face it. Yeah. And we got to Saskatoon Airport, which is the town where I grew up. And I was just like, I just don't want to do this. And yeah, well, I wasn't feeling in the best headspace. I rang Debbie from the airport, and she just gave me a pep talk. She's a legend as well. She's a true friend now. And she's like, just at the end, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. Because I was like, I just want to be home now. Yeah. I just want to be in my own bed. And she's like, sent me a picture of my dog and was like, look who's waiting for you when you get home, like that she'd found on my Facebook, I think. And yeah, and so I talked to her, and then I also accosted a group of WestJet pilots that were sat around in the airport because their flight had been delayed. And this is not like me at all. Like I don't take initiative to talk to anybody. Like I'm a really shy person. But I was like, oh well, what's the worst they can do? Say no. So I went up to them, they were eating, and I was like, oh, are you flying today? And they're like, yeah, well, should be, but there's a delay and blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, I just wanted to say hi. I'm a nervous flyer, and just it really helps me to talk to pilots. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. Any questions, just, you know, let us know. And I was like, well, I haven't got that many questions because, you know, I'd asked every possible question I ever could, but I was just having a general chat. But I did ask about the forest fire smoke, which I was a bit worried about, and they reassured me about that. One of their flights was cancelled because of the forest fire, but not because of the smoke, because of the logistics. And I was like, well, I just love hearing how passionate pilots are about aviation. And they're like, yeah, we really love flying, but we just hate all the sitting around like this. And I was like, yeah, that's just like a job, isn't it? You're like, there's parts of it you love, and then there's all the like boring logistical parts that you don't like, you know, paperwork and this and that. You know, it's like, I want to be flying the plane, not sat around in this random airport, not knowing where I'm going next, you know. So that really helped me. And then after that, I was feeling quite pleased with myself and went, and this airport is so quiet and lovely. My kids and husband were just sat somewhere. My son and husband are playing on the Nintendo. And my husband said to me again, trust your training, you're gonna be fine, you're fine on the way here, you know. And then he's like, play Mario Kart with our son. So, and I did, and it was great to be instructed to do something. Like, you know, when you're just like floundering.
Yeah.
And he's like, play Mario Kart with him. I sat down and I was like, okay. And yeah, then we boarded, and it was a little Dash 8 plane. And it was the best flight I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
The happiest I've ever been on a flight. Like, this little plane, I loved it. I think it has 88 seats, but it's in a 2-2 configuration.
That's right.
And my two boys sat together, and I sat next to my husband. I was next to the window, and I was just looking out, and the views were good because I think it flew at 20,000 feet or something. And I was just like marveling at the fact that we'd done that drive from Calgary to Saskatoon, took 7 hours, that in less than an hour or an hour, we were back in Calgary. And I wasn't sure how I'd be on that little plane, but I loved it.
Well, that's good. That's a really positive thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah. It was like being on a bus, because so many people there just use planes to commute, you know, to the next city, because the spaces are so huge, aren't they? And then that morning I had been quite worried about this 5-hour layover that we had. But because that flight went so well, I was happy as Larry, and we had the lounge, and that was so good. And we just loved it. You know, all the food and drink you could possibly want, and chilled out there. And then I went and got back on the Dreamliner. I had my same routine for the takeoff. Well, we got up there, the pilot said there might be some turbulence 3 hours in, and then again south of Iceland. I think that's probably, he said something about the jet stream, and I think they like hop into the jet stream, don't they? So you get going a bit quicker. But anyway, that turbulence was very negligible. I think the seatbelt sign came on for 5 minutes, the whole of the 2 long flights. So nothing really.
So a bit disappointed.
I floundered a bit.
Come on, where's the turbulence?
Yeah.
I'm ready for you.
I floundered a bit in the middle of the flight because I was tired, and that made it hard. And I had all my activities, but I was too tired to do them. And I couldn't sleep. Like, I still can't sleep on the plane. It's uncomfortable for a start, but and I was anxious about when we got home, because my husband had to drive us home at the equivalent of like 3 a.m. in Canada, 2 hours home. And I was like worried that he wouldn't sleep, which he didn't sleep much. And I wouldn't say I panicked, but I just didn't really know what to do with myself, I think. So I was staring at the map an awful lot. And I would get those same feelings of like, oh, did I hear the engine do something? I've got to check the altitude, you know. But it's very hard to control anxiety when you're tired, in any type of anxiety. So that, I think that was the main part of that. And by then you just want to be home. Like, it's like, oh God.
Well, a lot of people will sort of, you know, it's like I've said this before, we get more complaints on the way back from places. People are tired, they're fed up, they just want to get home. You know, it's like, press the zap me home button.
Just teleport me to my own bed now, please. But I mean, I controlled it. It was nothing like it used to be. Like, well, I don't know. I'm like 90% better. Like, I said on the group, I still have to check in with the map, but not the whole time. And I did watch a movie on the way home, which I've not done since 2009.
Wow. What do you
watch? And it was a movie I hadn't seen before, even. It was, I don't know, it was like a chick flick thing called Unpregnant. And I think it's quite low budget, but I had to keep dipping out time a few times, check the map, but I got through it. And I had a nice conversation with my husband, which, because I hadn't really caught up with him since the wedding. And just the fact that I was speaking on flights is like, whoa, because usually it's just like completely zone out. Nobody talk to me, nobody interact with me. I can't do the most basic thing, like get something out of a bag for my kids, you know. It's just like completely blue. So
so this is remarkable, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't be any happier. The one thing I would say to people is don't expect perfection, like, because I could have been like, oh, I want to love flying. I'm not at the stage where I love flying. But the amount of improvement I've seen is like, it's almost like even if I'm like this for the rest of my life, it's enough. I think I will get better because I feel like doing a European flight will be quite easy for me now. Well, I hope, touch wood.
Touch wood? What are you talking about?
The long flights are still quite overwhelming, and being over obscure places. Oh, we had a medical incident on the way home, actually, over Greenland, and they called doctors and things. Well, asked if any doctors were on board, and I think someone went. So I was like, oh God, maybe I'll have to divert. What would happen? Where would we go? And I was like thinking of Steve. Where's around here? And I was like, probably Reykjavik, because they'll have like better hospitals than Greenland, probably. I don't know if the person needs medical care. Anyway, we didn't divert. We just landed in Gatwick. But then some paramedics had to come get the person off when we landed, so that was frustrating because we just had to sit there for ages. It was quite funny because they said the seatbelt signs would stay on when we landed so that they could, disembark this patient. And then they're like, no, actually we have to switch them off because we can't open the door with the seatbelt signs on. So everyone thought that we were just getting off, and everyone stood up, and it's like, no, sit back down.
Yes, I said sit.
Yeah. And then, like I said, honestly, the scariest part of the journey was driving home.
Yeah.
With my husband so tired on the M25, M3, and buying him coffee and Red Bull and all the rest. And I'm like, how on earth am I worried about flying when this is like a big risk, actually?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's so busy. He's exhausted. Yeah. And there was actually 4 pilots on the way home. So I was like, oh, wow, I'm in good hands here.
Yeah. Is that enough for you, Melissa?
Yeah. There was 3 on the way out and 4 on the way back. So
they're breeding.
Yeah.
Well, that's. So, yeah, I feel like I've been there. I feel like I went there now. I feel like I've been. You've taken me. I like what I really liked about that is the sort of the blow by blow bit of and your authenticity of like not being perfect.
Yeah.
And the moments where you sort of struggled. That was really good. And I think people listening to this can take a lot of comfort in that you don't have to be perfect to be okay.
Yeah. It's like Pete Higgins always says, it doesn't say on your ticket you have to love flying. I love that.
Yeah.
And you just got to do it. And the other thing is, you've got to have motivation to do the thing, go to the place you want to go. So when I canceled that flight to Portugal, I said to my husband, like, I can't fly right now just to go sit on a beach or by a pool. Like, that's not enough motivation for me at that time. I mean, it would be now, but I needed to have something big. So for me, going back to Canada is always at the top of my list. I hadn't been back for 6 years, and some of my relatives are getting a lot older. Like, I don't know how many more times I'll get to see them. And it just so happened that coincidentally this family wedding was happening. So that was the icing on the cake, really. And like, made so many special memories. My kids are old enough to remember all this now, and they loved it. They loved seeing where I grew up. These are the
big important things. This is why we do it, isn't it?
Exactly. And so I was like, that motivation was always there for me, like, to do it. But I needed to have that high motivational factor, and you see it with other people, like Chris on the group that's in Dominican Republic now, like, renewed his vows with his wife. And he had that motivation, and we've both been on the sort of same time frame of our journey, like working really hard, and we've really supported each other. Actually, he sent me some lovely messages the day I flew, and to have those people behind you.
I love the I can't. It goes on so much now that I can't thank people individually because there's too many to thank.
Yeah.
And then it also feels a bit trite to say, no, thanks everyone. But it is just, it's mind blowing, isn't it? How much people support each other,
I actually don't think I could have took this trip without the Lovefly Facebook group. Like, I can't even express how much it's helped me, like, being part of it.
Well, you just have.
Yeah. There's not enough words, but I think everyone knows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think if there's anything. Just let me check here. Think anything else I wanted to. I think I got most of it in here. Yeah, I think I managed to cover it, actually. The only other thing is, if you're gonna tell the crew you're nervous, that's great, but don't have all your hopes pinned on the fact that they will, really be there for you. I know some of them are amazing and you read about it on Lovefly, but others not so much. And I certainly know the outbound flight I took, they were actually quite short-staffed, so that was probably the reason. I think they were down a couple of crew members, and you could really tell.
Hard work.
Yeah, and so they're probably just fed up, And I actually I wasn't particularly nervous, so I didn't really need the help. It was just, I'll just mention it. So but I had sort of said to myself, if they're not that helpful, don't let it ruin your flight. Don't be like, oh God, I'm ruined now.
It's a sign.
Yeah. So
grumpy staff, not safe. I've
got like all the tools I need, in my bag or in my head or on my phone, whatever.
Exactly.
And also I had a backup plan, actually, that I was going to buy Wi-Fi on board if I was really panicking and I needed to, message Lovefly people or, but I didn't need to, but it was my backup plan.
That's a good one. Yeah, I've seen some people do that. In fact, some people found the podcast on flights.
I know sometimes it's free, but it wasn't on my airline. But I was like, well, I'll pay the $30 or whatever it was if I need it, But it was all good. Also, John Bond is a legend too. he's been great with his advice. So thank you, John. Yeah,
he is good.
Yeah, he's like,
he's going to be unbearable when I see him tomorrow.
He's the voice of sense, really. Like, he just really just says it in such a, I don't know, not a blunt way, but just like, I don't know.
I've started to like him a lot more now since he's been in the group. I didn't like him that much before. Just a joke. No, I've known him like 30 odd years, so he's 30. Oh my goodness, I've just worked it out. 30, coming up to 36 years.
Oh my God.
He's a great guy. Well, there's lots of great people in the group, like yourself. So thank you.
Can I just say one last thing?
Sure.
Which is when I was at my cousin's wedding the night before, I talked to my uncle Doug, and I'm pretty sure he's nearly 80. But I was feeling a bit wobbly about flying home. And as soon as I saw him, he told me he listened to my podcast with Captain Steve, and he loved it. And he used to be in the Canadian Air Force. I think he did engineering, but I think he said he had a private pilot's license at one point. But he's an awesome guy because in his retirement, he took up gliding. So we had like quite a big conversation about gliding. He's like, you need to do it, blah, blah, blah. And aviation, and when I came home from that get together, I was like buzzing about flying again. And he really renewed my enthusiasm that night. And also just what an amazing guy he is. So he had a health issue, so he can't glide anymore. But now he's taken up sailing. And I'm like, he's just an inspiration, really, that just do what you want to do, no matter what your age. And so I'm really hoping he listens to this. I said if I do another one, he said he'll definitely listen. So
give him a name check.
Uncle Doug.
Yay. There you go, Uncle Doug. We're inspired by you.
And I gotta go up in a glider next, so that'll be my next project.
That's it. Definitely. Well, thank you, Melissa.
Thank you
for all you do. Thanks for all you do in the Lovefly group. And I know you said that it's reinforcing your own kind of learning, but it's massively helpful to people. So thank you so much, and for coming on again. And you know, this will be really good for people because they always want to know the so what bit. So you've gone off, you've done the flight, and here you are reporting back, and it's going to be massively helpful. So thank you. Yeah,
just anyone post for support if you need it, because you'll always get lovely support on there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Someone like you might pop up.
Yeah, exactly. Spending all my time on there as usual.
No, well, I really appreciate it, and you know, like, and I've hopefully some of the people you've mentioned here will listen to the podcast. I think they do anyway, but
I'm sure they will.
It's lovely that you've mentioned so many people as well. There's just too many people to thank. And
yeah, exactly. I couldn't possibly thank everybody.
Time and time again. And you're one of those. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.